Hello and welcome to question and answer time number 21. I'm your host, Adam Neely. Now that we're 21, we can legally drink alcohol here in the United States, and boy, are we going to need it. I'm here answering all of your questions about bass and music in general, so let's get started.
Question and answer time with Adam.
Hey Adam, since you graduated in Manhattan School of Music, I wanted to ask you about the student environment and the professorship happening there. 1. Regarding U.S. citizenship students, how do they interact with international students in terms of the alumni network and their need to study, schoolwork, homework, assignments, etc., or party? A lot. Are U.S. students busy most of the time there? 2. Do professors in Manhattan School of Music have a more practical-based or more theoretical discipline on teaching students? Bass.
That's a good question, and maybe you're coming from a couple different angles here. The first angle, I think you might have a particular view of what it is to be a college student in the United States. Maybe that might be propagated through popular culture views of heavy drinking and partying culture in the United States, like frat houses and all of that. If you're going to the Manhattan School of Music or any one of the elite music schools in the United States, especially on the East Coast, that is definitely not the culture of those schools. A student body is mainly just there to study music, live, eat, and breathe music, and that's what you should do too. Now, in terms of how US students interact with international students, here's the thing. The East Coast of the United States, especially in major metropolitan areas like New York City, is incredibly diverse. That whole idea of the United States as a melting pot, despite what current political climate might suggest, definitely applies to places like New York City. So nobody really cares if you're from another country because there are so many other people from other countries around here and everybody is in the same boat. Everybody's here just to play music and meet other people who are here to play music.
Hey Adam, as a relatively new subscriber, I've been exploring and loving all of your videos. I'm a female bassist and am just wondering, if you come up with some sort of general count using the people you've networked over the years, how many female bassists do you know out of all of the bassists you know? Do you know if they get the same gig offerings as the guys? Or are there any judgment/stereotypes made in the industry? I'm 18 and in the past year I've been gigging around, people always comment that there aren't many female bassists around. Should that be seen as a good thing for me? Thanks so much.
Yeah, so there really aren't that many female bass players out there. You know, in terms of people that I know personally, there's just a few of them out here on the New York scene that I know. There's Joan Chu, she's a Singaporean bass player, plays with a lot of people. I also know Kate Davis, she had some viral videos a couple of years ago. But in terms of female musicians in general, there just aren't that many. And this could be for many reasons, which I've talked about before, but in terms of disadvantages of being a female musician on the scene, it normally comes down to a lot of social pressures and a lot of somewhat toxic environments in terms of how people look at you as a musician and as an artist and as a professional. A lot of people talk very patronizingly towards you about music knowledge, especially music theory knowledge, about equipment, about gear, all these things that myself as a male bass player, I would never have to deal with from anybody. Other things like in social situations, people might be thinking that you're doing music for the wrong reasons, whatever those might be. And also, if you don't have your instrument in your hand, people might just assume that you're the wife or the girlfriend of somebody else in the band. So there's a lot of these really annoying and potentially really discouraging social factors that go into being a female musician. Now, in terms of advantages, I wouldn't call them necessarily advantages. I might call them consolation prizes. In certain circles, especially image-conscious circles like in pop and rock touring bands, they might prefer having a female backing band. And in that regard, maybe you have a slight leg up on your male colleagues. But in terms of all the BS that you might have to deal with on a day-to-day basis on a music scene, I wouldn't call that an advantage.
Hi Adam, nice work, generally speaking. You seem to have invested a very substantial amount of time into making these vids. Just a question, do you have some sort of material gain out of it? You do have quite many viewers, I'm a musician too, and I intend to be more active on YouTube, but I would like to make sure that I do have some reward. Do you think it's possible?
By this point, thanks to my gracious support from Patreon and a little bit of advertising revenue, yes, I do get a little bit of material support from my YouTube channel. If your goal is to make money, get a job and go make money. That could be actually if you're a musician too, like get the high-paying gigs that make money. It really doesn't matter what you are. If your goal is to make money, don't start a YouTube channel because it requires an incredible amount of unpaid work and prep work before you actually start seeing some sort of monetary reward. I've had this YouTube channel since the beginning of YouTube. 2006 is when I uploaded my first video, just to give you a little bit of perspective on how much work I've actually had to put into this before I started getting a little bit of support from both YouTube and my gracious Patreon subscribers. Shout out to Patreon.
You don't have to listen to me.
Don't worry, I probably won't.
But I just find these videos really weird talking about such general music topics and then forcing bass into it. In my opinion, it'd just be better to be like, okay, now grab your instrument, etc.
So this is the impasse at which I find myself. I have a really awesome introduction for Adam Neely's bass lessons. So in some way, I have to keep making bass lessons because I really want to keep using that introduction. But, you know, at the same time, this channel has gotten a little bit broader than just focusing on bass. So I am going to go back and forth between more bass-related content and more, I guess, general music content, because a lot of people have found my channel after I sort of geared my content to a little bit more broader music theory understanding. But at the end of the day, who really cares, because you definitely understood what I meant.
Hi, Adam. I'm taking a classical music elective this semester, not a music major, so bear with me. And it caused this question. Am I wrong to think that people care more about classical music soloists than modern soloists? And if that is true, why has that happened? Context. The professor was explaining what a concerto is before showing Vivaldi's Spring Concerto. The professor said something along the lines of a concerto's purpose is to showcase the capabilities of an instrument and/or soloist. I noticed that the shred metal of the 1980s attempts a similar purpose through showcasing some massive guitar solo. After showing the performance, he took a few minutes to talk about what a great violinist Julia Fischer is. But what makes her different from any shred guitar hero, i.e. Malmsteen, Satriani, Badio, etc., who have fallen in popularity since the late 80s? While Fischer's performance was incredible, I can't understand why people seem to care more about classical soloists performing concerto than any piece of shred guitar music.
Now, there's two things at play here. One, there's the death of the guitar hero, which a lot of people lament. The idea that in the 80s, guitar heroes were these gods of virtuosity. There's actually an awesome YouTube channel you should check out called SamuraiGuitarist, and he talks about the death of the guitar hero in terms of low barrier of entry to a particular genre of music. I've linked that in the description. But beyond that, it's also, you're talking about academic music versus the real world music. And in academia, especially among people that really just have lived, breathed, and ate classical music and academic classical music, they don't really have the frame of reference that you might. You're coming from an academic system and you're trying to think about like, oh, rage against the academic system. That's a very small thing. There's a much broader world out there, especially on the world of the internet, which, thank God, the world of the internet is so much larger than the world of academia, because you can then expose yourself to things and people that really care about the things that you want and care about, like, for example, 80s shred guitar gods. Now, I do think it is a really apt analogy to compare people like Paganini to, say, Steve Vai. I probably wouldn't compare Paganini to Yngwie Malmsteen. I find Yngwie Malmsteen incredibly one-dimensional.
I can't believe you said that about Yngwie Malmsteen. Ah!
I really am not a huge fan, but people like Steve Vai, sure, that's awesome.
Hey, Adam. I'm a huge fan and an inspiring musician.
An aspiring musician. All right.
My dream is to attend the Berklee School of Music. I'm a multi-instrumentalist, but I primarily play bass. I was wondering if you could tell me how important sight reading is when auditioning for and beginning to attend Berklee.
So if you can't sight read that well, not a huge deal, but make sure whatever it is that you do in terms of your prepared piece, you just absolutely nail. It's very important. So prioritize. I mean, if you have an audition coming up next year, sure, work on your sight reading and that can help a little bit. But if it's coming up now, really just focus on your prepared piece.
You are literally copying Macintosh Plus.
Yes, that literally was the point of the video. Congratulations, you found out.
Hey, Adam, what about chords? I always find it hard to audiate intervals, especially chords. They're not as clear as single-note melodies.
Audiating chords becomes a lot easier if you play an instrument which is a chordal instrument, because the physical action of playing those chords will get them in your ear and thus your musical brain a lot easier than, say, if you're playing bass. So I fully recommend practicing piano or practicing guitar, because hearing those chordal shapes and hearing those things as sort of sound units, sound blocks, things that you can kind of wrap your head around, is a lot easier than any other sort of way of approaching it.
If one is not able to audiate, does this mean that they will never suffer from earworms?
That, I feel like, is a good consolation prize for people who can't audiate. Yes, maybe you won't be able to play and understand and feel and experience music the same way, but at least you won't get a tune stuck in your ear.
Wonderful. Just got a small question for you. Do you really think that Berklee has pretty advanced programs? Ear training, yeah, maybe. But harmony, I doubt it. I see the math, but I do not understand the purpose of doing those analysis. For example, Roman numeral analysis or chord scales. I gig outside of school. To be honest, none of those stuff I learned are very useful. Is it because I don't compose as much as a performer, or what?
Is the material advanced? Yes. There's plenty of advanced, higher level electives that you can take at Berklee in terms of advanced harmonic analysis, advanced modal. I don't know, I took a bunch of Greek classes as part of my jazz composition curriculum, and they were all like really far out there, and I still look over my notes from time to time. And the question is, of course, is it applicable? Maybe not 100%, but it certainly inspired me to do a lot of things in my career, and it certainly inspired me to learn more about music. And I think that may have directly led to me doing this sort of channel where I explore advanced harmonic concepts and advanced concepts in music. So you have to sort of think about things with a little bit of a more holistic viewpoint of whether or not, can I use this for this? It goes a little bit beyond that.
Yay, now I can do something productive. Been waiting for this all day. Aside from vocals, is your band using a PA or just playing with your backline unmiked? Just curious because of the mixer that's in a few shots. I would assume that it would be just for vocals, but just out of curiosity.
So no, it's not just the vocalists which run into the board. The whole band runs into the board. In fact, one of the reasons why the audio on that gig log was so good was because I was able to get a multi-track from the board and record everything into my computer. And I was only able to do that because everybody was running into the board. Now, we don't necessarily have to blast everything through the mains, but you'd be surprised in certain rooms, you really need a mic'd up drum set. We also try and keep the onstage volume as low as we can, so the singers will be able to hear themselves, and so we also can then control everything and what the actual audience hears through the mains.
Top 40 plays 5-year-old songs.
Yeah, so this year was not very good for dance pop. Everything has been slowed down significantly, which is not very good for live bands. One Dance, I guess, is a cool song, but man, it does not translate live very well. I mean, there's a couple good songs which translate well, like Sia's Cheap Thrills with Sean Paul, but for the most part, that slower tempo just does not really get people going the same way that, a song like Raise Your Glass or something like that.
Hi Adam, I love your videos, but please answer me one question, smiley face. I'm curious why you chose New York as the place for you to make a living playing music. I'm getting ready to finish my second graduate degree from the Indiana University School of Music and Guitar Performance, and I know I will have to move somewhere else to find the musical opportunities I want. There just aren't many professional opportunities in music outside of the university here in Indiana. What kind of things would you recommend considering when deciding to relocate in order to make a living as a performing musician?
Well, I chose New York because it is an incredibly high concentration of amazing world-class musicians. I've heard it described as jazz Disneyland because, you can just walk into the West Village and there's Mark Juliana playing with Brad Mehldau and Vijay Iyer and all of these amazing musicians, world-class musicians just hanging out. In fact, if you're ever in New York City when the band Nowhere plays, just every amazing musician you have ever heard of is just hanging out in the room. That's essentially what New York is, and that's why people come. Now, because there's so many amazing musicians, the market is super saturated and maybe there's not a whole lot of paying work out there, but you will be playing with some pretty amazing people, and that's what I love about New York.
Does the wedding band you play for use any pre-recorded backings, Adam?
Yes, that is a rather dirty little secret of the band. We do use occasionally backing tracks, maybe about 15% of the time. On songs like Rather Be, which was the last song in that gig vlog, you can hear the backing track pretty clearly. We mainly do that because to play keyboard and then all those strings and everything else just for one keyboard player just makes no sense. So it's basically a bunch of layers that we wouldn't normally be able to do with our normal 4-piece rhythm section. It's just sort of an augmenting thing versus something that we use to replace the sound of the band. I think that's one of the cheesiest sounds and cheesiest things ever if you just hear a track blaring with no band behind it. I've seen that happen a couple times. It is not something that I would ever want to be associated with.
Hey Adam, I have a general question. I played this gig the other night with a lot of slow ballads, and I noticed I was rushing on a lot of the slow tunes. Do you have any advice on how to keep good time on slower tunes?
For playing slower stuff, I would recommend subdividing. Basically taking whatever the basic pulse is and then counting a really, really fast pulse in between everything. So if you're going like this is maybe the tempo. In your head, what you're feeling is 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. That way it's going to be a lot more difficult to actually rush because you will really feel when you're rushing and when you're not.
What was the worst wedding gig you've ever had?
So basically in our contract we say that we have to take breaks because that's obvious. As a band you can't just keep playing for 3 hours straight, but what we do whenever we take breaks is we basically always ensure that there's a live musician playing. So we'll always have somebody playing piano or whatever, and we try and time the breaks for dinner or dessert so people have time to relax, breathe, and then they come back and start dancing again. But there's one wedding where the bride just insisted that we kept playing, and there's one of two ways that we can actually approach this. We can stand firm on our ground no, it's in our contract, or we can just say oh, okay, we'll do it. So we did that. We went back up and started playing. Halfway through that next set, my amplifier started smoking. And I made the mistake of shouting, "Fire!" because I thought there legitimately was a fire. And of course, half the singers run off the stage, and I realized, oh, it's not a fire, it's just smoking, and it's this amplifier is done. I run and I beat a chord from the wall, and of course, that cord from the wall was also attached to the guitarist's amp. This is during Sweet Home Alabama, right before the guitar solo, and we all of a sudden don't have any bass or guitar. I plug in the guitar amp, and it turns out that the guitarist's amp was a digital model, the Fender Mustang. And I'm like, oh my God, what has just happened? Because of course the Mustang comes back on the extreme metal setting. And of course the guitarist is about ready to take the solo, and he does the solo with just this noise-scape for somebody's wedding of just drums and guitar solo. And meanwhile, I'm running across the stage to try and plug my bass directly into the board, to get a DI, plug it into the board, and do the rest of the gig like that. Everything's going poorly. And of course, to top it off at the end of the evening, the bride insists that we play Jason Derulo's I Want You to Want Me, which is fine, but none of the band actually knows it. And, normally speaking, when we have breaks, if somebody requests, especially the bride, oh, do you know the song? We'll try and learn it during the break, because 10 minutes is enough to learn a basic song easy. But we didn't have any breaks, remember, because this bride was very, very insistent. So we said as much, but we're like, all right, well, we'll just play an MP3 for them. That's fine. This is their last song, this is the last request, and then we can get out of here. The drummer was like, oh, I know the song, I can play along if you just like feed it through my in-ears, which we did. And then of course, as soon as we start playing, the in-ears die and stop working, so we can't hear the track, and he gets wildly off the track, and it was just the most amateur thing I've ever seen in my life. And I was embarrassed to be part of it all. So that is the worst wedding I ever played. Now, it could have been a lot worse if we copped more of an attitude towards the people involved. But the thing that I've always found is that it's easier just to let things slide, do as you're told, and get out of there. Not like let the negativity like sweep over you. Because if we had like held on to our like deeply like, oh no, we need to take a break now, it would have just been a lot more of a bad experience for us. And so we got out alive, and I hope to never do one of those weddings again. All right, thanks for watching. These lights have started dying on me. This is really sad. Oh well. If you like what you've seen, please comment, like, and subscribe. I have a new video coming out every Monday. These are my Patreon subscribers down here. Thank you so much for subscribing. Yeah, guys, I really appreciate all of the comments that you have left. It's been really awesome answering and interacting with you guys like this. I have a new video coming out very soon. And until next time, peace.